Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mastering SQL Server or comprehensive training. Good to have here for part 8. Today we are going to take a close look at how triggers work in SQL Server. You will learn what they are, when to use them, and how to work with inserted and deleted tables. If you have not gone through part 7 yet, take a moment to watch that first. It lays the groundwork you need before moving into this part. Let's get started. So in this section, we are going to discuss about the triggers in SQL Server. So what is the trigger? Trigger is a program that will perform a specific task when it is executed. Triggers are used to give a condition or rules on a tables or else on a database or else on an entire SQL Server, like on all databases. To overcome the drawback of constraints, triggers are introduced. Constraints will work on tables and will work on insert and update commands. Trigger will work on insert, update, delete, create, alter, and drop commands. A trigger will be executed implicitly, means SQL Server will execute a trigger internally. SQL Server contains after triggers instead of triggers, DDL triggers, and the CLR triggers. After triggers and instead of triggers will work on DML commands. DDL triggers will work on the DDL commands. After trigger means after insert or after update or after delete commands. You don't call a trigger manually. It fires or it executes automatically when a specific events like insert, update, delete, or DDL operations happens. Triggers will execute after or instead of an event depending on type. So a magic table means it contains the column of a table on which the magic table is created. The magic table will exist only at the time of the execution of the trigger program. A trigger execution will take a few milliseconds. Okay. So there are two types of the magic tables. The first one is the inserted magic table and the deleted magic table. So in the inserted magic table, new record given in the table will be stored in the inserted magic table. In the deleted magic table, the records deleted from the table will be stored in the deleted magic table. If you open a table to insert, update or delete rows, SQL Server can fire a trigger before or after that action completes. They are often used to keep data consistent, enforce rules, or track changes without relying on application code. So here is the trigger syntax. There are two types of trigger syntax. The first one is the older version and the second one is the new SQL Server syntax. In the older version of syntax, we use the create trigger name for after trigger or instead of trigger or DDL triggers on the table name or on database or on all servers as begin their statements and they need. In the new SQL Server syntax, we use the create trigger name on table name, database or server for after trigger instead of trigger DDL triggers as begin statements and they need. Okay. To modify triggers, we use the below syntax, that is the alter trigger, then trigger name. So to view the triggers in the current database, we use the select star from sys objects where x type equals to tr. Okay. So let's check in real time. Okay. Let me open the SQL Server Management Studio. Let me connect. Let me open a new query tab and go to the database. Okay. Now let me execute this command. Okay. So let just give a second. So Right now we don't have any triggers. Okay, so to view the definition of triggers, we can use sp underscore help text, the trigger name. To delete trigger, we can use the drop trigger name. So if it is on the database, then we can use on the database, and if the trigger is for all servers, then we can use on all servers. Okay, so now let's have a look on the types of the triggers. So the SQL Server contains four types of triggers, and those are the DML triggers, TDL triggers, logon triggers, and the CLR triggers. So let's discuss one by one. So first is the DML triggers. So DML triggers are the most common triggers. So these are the ones you use most often. And the DML trigger fire automatically when a data change happens. Okay, like insert, update, delete on a table or a view. So again, there are two types of the DML triggers. First one is the after trigger. This is the default one, and the second one is the instead of triggers. So let's discuss one by one. So first, discuss the after trigger, the default one. So after trigger executes after the DML operation completes successfully. After triggers fires after the triggering actions. Okay, the insert, update, and delete statements causes and after trigger to fire after the respective statements complete execution. So for this we have created two tables. Okay, the first one is the employee and employees audits. So let's check employees, and the second one is employee audit. Okay, now let's check the data inside this. Okay, now now we can see the example in a real time. Okay, so first example is we can create a trigger for the insert. Okay, on employee tables. Okay, let's check this in real time. So here is the example of creating the insert table, insert trigger on the employee table. Okay, so when the insert statements happen on the employee, then it will insert the data into the employee audit. Okay, let's create a trigger. So I have created this trigger right now. Okay, so to check whether this trigger is working fine or not, we can execute the statements, like we can give the employee ID as 10 for the employee name Sanjay. Okay, and this is the salary. Okay, let me execute this one. So here you can see there are one row affected, one row affected means total two rows affected. So first row is for insert the data into the employee table, and the second one is for inserting data into the audit tables. Let's check in the real time. Okay, let's execute. So here you see the Sanjay is added, and if you scroll down, you can see new employee with ID 10 is added. Okay, at November 23rd, 2025. Okay, now let's check uh, another example for the delete. Okay, let's create another trigger for the delete statement. Okay, so here we are creating a trigger. Okay, on employee table for delete. Okay, and in the after delete, okay, we are just logging into employee audit. Okay, so here is the employee with ID is deleted at. Okay, here is the message we are logging here. Let me execute this. Okay, now I have created the trigger. Let me check whether it is working fine or not. Okay, uh, let me delete the recent one, employee. Okay, so now one row is affected. Let's go here and check this one. Okay, this is the another one. Now you can see the message, employee with ID 10 is deleted at, this is the date and time. Okay, now let's create another trigger which will not allow user to add, update or edit or delete the records from the table. Okay, so let me create a new table, new trigger which will not allow or any user to insert or update or delete data from the employee table. Okay, now I have created this one. So to check whether it's working fine or not, uh, let me execute the insert statement. So here you see the DML operations are not allowed with the same message. Okay, so for update you will see the same message, and for the delete you see the same message. So now the second type is instead of trigger. So we discuss this in detail. Means instead of trigger executes in a place of the DML operations. Instead of triggers fired, instead of the triggering actions, the insert, update, delete statements causes an instead of trigger to fire instead of the respective statement execution. With instead of insert, the value when insert command is executed, then the value will go only into the inserted magic table, but the value will not go to the table on which trigger is created. So instead of trigger can be used on table or view. Instead of insert, trigger is basically used to update a view having multiple base tables. And instead of trigger is a special kind of trigger in SQL Server that replaces the normal action of an insert, update or delete statement. So normally when you run the statement like the delete from the employees where id equal to 1, so then SQL Server deletes or removes those records or rows. Okay, but if there is an instead of delete triggers on the employee table, the SQL Server won't delete the row directly. Instead of it runs the trigger instead of the delete operation. That means the trigger takes control. It decides what to do next. It might log the change in another table, apply custom business logic, or even prevent the change altogether. So let's check this in real time with the example. Okay, let me create the instead of delete uh, trigger. Okay, okay, now I have created the trigger. Okay, let's delete one employee. Delete employees. Okay, id equals to 7. So here it gives us message like the deletion is not allowed directly on employee tables. Okay, now let's check the employee audit log, employees audit table. Okay, so here you can see the message, the employee with id is attempted to delete at means the date and time. So here is some note. Now if someone tries to delete on the employee records, SQL Server runs this trigger instead of deleting the row. So the deletion is locked, but the row stays in the table. It is not actually deleted. When to use an instead of trigger. Okay. So you want find control over what happens during data changes. So that time you can use the instead of trigger. Also, you need to enforce the business rules that SQL constraints alone can't handle. Okay, and also you are working with the views because you cannot normally perform insert, update, or delete directly on complex view, but you make them updatable using the instead of triggers. So in these three situations, you can use the instead of triggers. So here is an example of the view. Okay, so let's say you have a view that joins the two tables. Normally, if you try to insert into the view, SQL throws an error. But if you use the instead of trigger, you can make the view. It means it works. Okay, so let's see this in a real time with the example. Now, so I'm going to create a view, that is view employees audit. We are selecting the ID, name, and the audit data, okay, from the employee and the employee audit table. Now I have created the view. Let me create a trigger, okay, instead of trigger on the views. Okay, now I have created the trigger on the views. Okay, let's check whether it's working fine or not. So now I'm going to insert the values into the view. Okay, okay, so DML operations are not allowed. This is the trigger, that means this gives the validation because of we have created the trigger. Okay, ID, name, salary. I put it. Okay, okay, let me drop this trigger, that message, because of the we have created the trigger on the delete. Okay, now drop this trigger. Okay, let's execute this one. Now here is we got the three rows affected. Okay, let's check the values from the employee and the employee table. Now here you can see Ajay is get added. Okay, okay, with ID 2. Now you can see the message here is the new employee with added at member, and this is the time. Okay, so normally when you try to insert into the view, then the SQL server will throw an error but with an instead of trigger you can make view work. Now you can insert the data into the view, and the trigger will take care of inserting data into the correct base table. Okay, so here are some points to be need some points to be remember. So instead of trigger, replace the default actions. They can be used on a table or views. You can only have one instead of trigger per actions. Okay, and they are great for customizing or restriction data changes. Now the second type is the DDL triggers. Okay, so this trigger will work on the create, alter, and the drop commands. So it is used to create a database level trigger and the server level triggers. DDL triggers are special triggers that fire in response to schema change, not the data change. That means instead of reacting to the insert, update, or delete like DML triggers, they respond to commands such as the create, alter, drop, grant, deny, revoke, rename, and other database or the SQL level DDL operations. So while DML triggers watch data, DDL triggers watch structures. When to use the DDL triggers? If you want to execute some code in response to a specific DDL event, okay, to prevent certain changes on your database schema, audit the changes that the user may is making in the database structure. So in this scenario, you can use make use of the DDL triggers. So here is the syntax. Okay, so create trigger name on the, here is the scope like the server or on the database. Here is the for event and as begin the statements. Now so let me create one, means we can see the one example of DDL triggers. Okay, so here we are creating a trigger, okay, that will not allow to create table or alter table or the drop table, okay, on this EMP database. So now I have created the trigger. So now I'm trying to create a table here. Okay, so here is already employee is exist, employee table is exist. Let me give change the name of the table. So now it gives me the message like the DDL operations are not allowed. Okay, so the third type of trigger is the logon trigger. So as the name implies, a logon trigger fires in response to the logon events. Logon triggers fires after the authentication phase of the login is in finishes, but before the user session is actually established. So logon triggers can be used for tracking login activities, restricting logins to SQL Server, or limiting the number of sessions for a specific login. So to check the active user sessions, okay, you can use this command. Let's check this. Here is the command. So you see, these are the active sessions. Okay. So here is and the syntax of the logon triggers. Create trigger name on all servers for logon as begin. Here is the logic, whatever you want, and then the end. So here is an example of the logon triggers. Let's check this in real time. So now I'm creating a trigger with the TR audit login. Okay, Let me execute this one. Okay, I have executed this one and created the trigger. So here, this we can use this query to check the errors. Okay, and the last one is the CLR triggers. So CLR triggers are triggers based on the CLR. CLR integration is new in SQL Server 2008, and it allows for the database objects such as the trigger to be added in .NET. We can code both TDL and DML triggers by using supported CLR like C#. So thanks for spending time on this lesson. I hope part it give you a clear understanding of how trigger works and when to use them. If you found this helpful, make sure to like the video, follow the series and subscribe to the jangitech channel so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you.